Welcome. And it's really lovely to see you all here. There's so many people that have been giving you some amazing presentations over this summit. It's really a privilege to be here with you and share what I'm going to share with you today. So, I'm talking about wisdom unlocked and actually how women can lead the future of work with emotional and artificial intelligence. And I know that you've all heard a lot of things about artificial intelligence and you're all probably using it. And so, some of the things that I might talk to you about today might seem like a little bit superfluous to your life, right? But I think it's really important to understand, especially as we age, how in leadership women need to start thinking about the benefits of their emotional intelligence and how it overlays how we might use AI to assist us in our work and in our business. So, on that note, let me just take you through our little presentation. The moment that we're in the world of work that's changing really fast, we've seen such big sort of expansion into our capability as human beings over the last 3 years that I don't think any of us were really anticipating at all. And so, a lot of us, when we're working in business, have adopted the use of AI, some of us faster than others. And for most of us, it's been beneficial, but for a lot of people, it can feel quite overwhelming. AI provides this constant change, higher expectations. Now, the ability to get more output more often is there, but actually, the more output more often means that we have to get it out into the world and actually share more information. And women over 40 are leading at higher levels while carrying more than ever. We've got lots more responsibilities in our lives. We have challenges in terms of what this period of our life actually brings us in terms of change. And, it's really important to recognize how that change starts to impact the way that we lead and the way that we show up on a daily basis. So, who am I to talk to you about all of this? I was, once written up as Australia's most influential woman in mental health. My background is as a psychologist. I've also been recognized as one of the top 5 impactful women leaders driving remarkable global transformations. So, what's amazing about all of this and all of these accolades is that it wasn't soon after I was written up with this sort of, top 5 perspective that my life actually came crashing down. And I think it's a really important point to just pause for a moment while I ask permission to be vulnerable. Part of what had happened, I've got the top of my game. My business is doing extremely well. This is the beginning of 2020. And I know you're all going to think, oh, yeah, COVID had an impact on that. To a certain extent, it did. However, the bigger impact, which I didn't realize until much later, was actually the impact of menopause. And menopause had actually changed the way that my body was able to cope with stress. However, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware that this had had any impact at all. In fact, when I went through menopause, I would have said to you, it was easy. I had no problems actually with regards to how menopause impacted my body. Maybe I had a few hot flashes. I just remember going to the doctor and getting blood tests, and she said, "You're done. It's finished." And I was kind of like, cool, don't need to worry about that in my life anymore. Had not any awareness and nobody explained to me the things that I needed to be looking for. Fast forward a couple of years later, and I did go through a period of high stress. But the issue with the impact of the high stress was that it hit me really, I think, much harder than what it would have done if it had happened 5 years earlier. And despite all of my efforts in terms of putting everything back together, using all of my psychological skills, I still couldn't seem to bounce back from it. And at the end of 2022, I literally couldn't cope anymore. I closed the doors on a $500,000 a year business and I just walked away. I'd had 12 staff, everything had just sort of deteriorated over about a year, and I just closed the doors and walked away. I couldn't cope anymore. I just didn't have it in me to continue to show up and give to everybody else. I didn't even feel like I could give to myself. And Some of you might be aware that there's a big rise on social media about the We Don't Care Club at this point, where it feels liberating to be able to say, we don't care what other people think or feel or whatever. And yeah, it might feel liberating in some areas, but what if you know that you feel like you don't care and yet you know that you should? So that was the situation that I was in. Yes, I was under a lot of stress and pressure, and I expected that to have an impact. What I didn't expect was it to have such a big impact that I didn't feel like I could get up from it. It just never felt like the bounce in my ball was ever there. I had no resilience anymore, and I really didn't understand why. So there's an invisible weight on women over 40. So, it can feel very heavy, even when everything looks very successful. I had been extremely successful in my business and I'd done a whole lot of things that were working really well. But post the age of 40, we've got lots of transitional changes happening. We've got caregiving roles where we move from caregiving around children to caregiving of parents. We still have leadership responsibilities in the workplace. We often have lots of people relying on us and we're carrying all sorts of things, home and family, team performance, all of these expectations on us. And at the same time, we're expected to manage our own health and well-being, show up and do the things, go to the gym, eat well, do all of these sorts of things, and burn the candle at both ends, which is not something that most of us can manage to do. We have hormonal transitions at this point in life that starts to see women in their 40s starting to have a big impact in terms of sleep. Now, from a psychological perspective, we always look at sleep as being an issue with regards to anxiety or depression. But what I've now learned is that sleep is strongly affected by the loss of progesterone. So through your 40s, you start to lose progesterone slowly. This is before we lose estrogen. And as the progesterone declines, our sleep actually gets more difficult to maintain and it's harder to fall asleep, it's harder to stay asleep, and we don't seem to sleep for as long. And we're not getting deep sleep. So what happens is we start to have issues with being able to reset our cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone. So there is this huge pressure on women as we age, when we've actually reached the peak of our game, to also maintain all of these things and obligations and responsibilities around us. And most of us aren't prepared for how that's going to impact our body and then the complication of what's coming next. So I want to talk to you just briefly about the science of burnout. It's not just this sort of, physical thing. A lot of people get confused between burnout and what's depression. It's the physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. It's this sense of not only not caring, but just not feeling like you have any energy to focus on anything at all. And it's quite different to depression in the sense that it doesn't seem to have this cognitive loading that goes with it. We're not necessarily sitting there thinking, negative or bad things about ourselves that lead us into this downward spiral. It just seems to happen physically, and we don't necessarily understand why. So, what does burnout look like? Physical symptoms, we get fatigue, headache, and digestive issues, disrupted sleep, as I said, muscle tension, and illness. Emotionally, we can feel very overwhelmed, detached, a sense of hopelessness, cynicism about work, responsibilities. Cognitively, we forget everything. It seems like our mind has suddenly turned into Swiss cheese with the difficulty concentrating. We've got work responsibilities. We can't even, think about them. And there is this growing sense of just not caring. And behaviorally, we end up finding that we're withdrawing from social activities. So this is where it can look like depression. We've got reduced productivity, we procrastinate, we've got unhealthy coping mechanisms, that extra glass of wine at the end of the night, overeating, social media doom scrolling, online shopping, you name it. Anything that is a numbing avoidant activity tends to be where our brain goes. So, this is what burnout looks like. This is what a lot of you might be experiencing or starting to notice about yourself. And you might just do what the majority of, the world says you should do, is just push through, just keep going, and, you'll get over it eventually. But I'm here to tell you that you don't tend to get over it. But It's not all bad. This era is actually an opportunity. While we've got things like AI to assist us to improve the way that we run our businesses and the way that we show up every day, then at the same time, we've got lots of information available to us about our health and what we can do to improve it for ourselves. So we've got a lot of pressure at the moment, but there is definitely potential. And one of the things I want to remind you of is that women at this phase of their life have wisdom, experience, a whole lot of judgment and intuition that actually allows them to show up with certainty and to lead in a really, I want to say, a really nice work environment where you can actually share information, help people to understand what it's like to be human and the fact that you recognize that you are one. And that we've got these pressures, but at the same time, we've got this insight and knowledge and awareness that we can actually turn around and apply to our businesses or our teams. So I want you to start thinking about embracing your wise woman wisdom to your advantage. So let's talk about emotional intelligence. Our EQ, our emotional quotient, as they like to talk about it, is your leadership superpower. This is the self awareness that you have, that you've developed over the course of your life. You've got better emotional regulation. We like to hope so by this stage. We have empathy, we have perspective. We've got social intelligence and an idea about relationship skills, ways of showing up and interacting with others that give us that real advantage and understanding because we've been around for a while and we've been there and done that a little bit. We get much better sense of making meaning of the nuances that go on in any work environment without necessarily needing to wait for people to speak openly or communicate exactly what they're feeling or what's happening. So we tend to be really strongly drawn to purpose-driven leadership by this time in our lives. It's that point that we get to where we kind of go, I really want to show up and do something that feels like it's got a strong sense of purpose for where I want to be in my life and who I want to show up as. So our EQ tends to deepen with our age and our lived experience. And so I want you to really acknowledge that you're going to embrace that. It's a really valuable part of what you've kind of drawn from your whole life experience, and it's important. It matters more now because it helps us to improve communication and reduce conflict in the work environment. It creates psychological safety for others and it builds a stronger culture within your organization. And it allows you to support complex decision making even when the situation seems really messy. And EQ builds that trust with people during uncertain times, and it makes our leadership as women feel more human and sustainable. It's the part that allows us to have some empathy and understanding with our people and, what the pressures are. Now, I'm just going to throw in there one of the things about, this in a leadership component is, I would have said I had a great deal of EQ in my business. I was very supportive of all of my staff. In fact, I was probably more understanding and kind to them and their needs than I probably was to myself. And this is a common challenge that we end up with as women leaders. How do we kind of create that balance? How do we end up being as kind to ourselves as we are to our people? How do we embrace some of those work life balance adjustments that we encourage in our people? Because we often do it for them, but we don't do it for ourselves. And this is something that we also end up in our families. We give to everybody else. We tend not to give to ourselves until the very end. We almost get what's left over. And I want to encourage you to think about putting yourself more at the top of that tree in terms of what you get, as opposed to getting at the bottom where it's all, you're getting the leftovers. So, when we look at AI and how we can use AI to assist our daily life, I want you to think about ally. Like it's as AI is your new ally. So, why would I say that we should use it as an ally? There are multiple things that you can do now using AI that will really help your business planning and streamline some of the things that you need to do on a daily basis. It helps to reduce repetitive tasks. And so one of the things that kind of happens is the things that we've traditionally done over and over again are the most easy things to delegate to AI. Now, a lot of people I know get a bit, concerned about emails and these sorts of things, but actually, if you can train your AI very effectively, you'll find that even though it takes a bit of time to begin with, one of the things that will happen over time is it becomes more competent and more responsive to the way that you want to show up and the way that you want to communicate. So it's a tool. It doesn't replace humans, right? It just supports us to actually get that wisdom out there. And one of the things that I find that's very useful about it is when I'm doing research and following through on some of these elements, it's a tool that allows us to actually get further quicker, and we can get more insight and more information, and we can challenge the assumptions that we have about particular ideas, and we can do that all within what would have taken us, a good week of research before can come to you in a minute. And so the challenge on the flip side of that is the overwhelm that can potentially come with it. And so this is about how do you manage both? So I want you to think about EQ or EI, your emotional intelligence, and the artificial intelligence, and bringing them together in a new leadership model. So AI supports the tasks, and your EQ, emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, here guides the wisdom. So you have that insight and awareness from all of your years of experience. And what we're going to do is actually help the AI learn all of that knowledge and wisdom from yourself. And we're going to use it to improve the outcomes that you'll have in your business and streamline things so that you're working smarter, not harder. So, why is it that women don't use AI? Because a lot of women are a little bit scared of it, particularly older women. When if you're in that 40, 50 age range, maybe you played around with it, but you didn't know, it seemed like a distraction actually, that you had a lot of work to do. And so you kind of played with it, but you didn't necessarily get right into how you might be able to use it really well in your business. Some people just think it's too hard. They're too busy to learn how to do it. So, one of the things that I find is that a lot of people worry about the fact that if they're, just going down a rabbit hole with AI research or doing things, playing around with ChatGPT, as I say, what tends to happen is they feel like it distracts them from the real work, the things that they really have to get done. And so a lot of people played with it at the beginning and then kind of went, "Oh, that's a bit of a distraction. That's too hard." And we've gone back to just doing things the same way that we've always done them. So we've got this sense of feeling, scared of how we would implement it, not feeling that we have enough technology understanding to implement it properly. We worry that we will get it wrong and that it won't work very well in our business, or that if we automate these things, that we fear that we lose control of those touch points, especially with our clients at the front end. Most people, if they've adopted it at all, they tend to use it for their social media posting and that sort of thing. But even then, it can generate almost so much content for you and so many ideas that even that seems quite overwhelming to then put it out there in terms of your social media and your interactions with others. So, how do we strike that really delicate balance between the use of AI in our business, using our emotional intelligence about where it needs to be? Because the reality is, our wisdom makes us better at using AI safely and effectively. It's not something that we just rush into without thinking about the consequences of maybe the way that we use it or what it sort of says and how it impacts others. So, I want you to think about how you could use AI to reduce the chances of burnout. Because what I don't want to see is that people end up in the situation that I was in my business, where I literally ran myself into the ground. My need to show up for everybody else was, so strong. I had staff that were reliant on me, I had clients that were reliant on me. And I just felt like I had to keep showing up and giving to everybody else, but I was never giving to myself. And that became a really big problem. So, if I'd had AI back then to help me, what were some of the ways that I might have been able to reduce the pressure on myself? Now, very simply, we've got emails and documents. A lot of you would have already been using it within, your video conferencing platforms to summarize your meetings, get notes. What I find though is that sometimes the production of what comes out the other end is usually more detailed than the notes that you would have taken for yourself. So I often find that rather than taking on full transcripts, it's better if you just get a summary of what's actually gone on in the meeting with the action points that need to be taken and who they belong to. So it's about training. And I want you to think about all of your AI tools as just another assistant that you have to be able to show up and give you things in a format that's useful. And if you find that the format that you're getting out the other end is not useful for you, try and spend the time to train it to give you useful information, because in much the same way as you would start with a new staff member and train the new staff member into how to show up and give you exactly what you need, then I want you to think about AI as the same sort of thing. You need to spend some time actually working with it to train it to understand what output you need and how you need it. And, this is part of where, unfortunately, a lot of the free tools that you can use, even the free versions of different AI, they don't really allow you to train it to in the same way with as much detail and be able to keep memory of the conversations that you've had with it, so that it's developing a knowledge base in the back end about you, about your business, and about how you want to show up in the world. So in my case, when I wanted to do things like social media preparation, I ended up uploading all of my previous books and communications, blog posts. I actually gave it a link even to my YouTube channel, so it understands how I show up in the world, and it understands how I interact with people, and it gets to sound like my voice, so that when I'm showing up and communicating with people in person, it doesn't look like my social media posts are written by AI, because actually my wording, the way that I speak, the way that I interact is also reflected in what's coming out, because I've taken the time to train it. Creating plans and outlines is one of the things that I think has been really amazing for me. I'm starting a new program called Edge Empowerment, and it's all about menopause and actually helping women get their energy, drive, growth, and expertise, all of that back, because this is something that we seem to lose around menopause, and empowering women to actually step back into their sense of being those wise women in our community, and showing up every day with that energy and drive back into their lives. In doing that, I really wanted to kind of unpack how this might look. I've been in business for more than 25 years, and yet I found it really easy to go in and interact with the AI about the ideas that I had about what I wanted this new business and new program to look like, who my target audience was, and be able to do some of the research that I would have normally spent hours and hours online doing, Google searches, trying to find the competitors, trying to find the different sort of people that I needed to understand in the marketplace. And actually, because I was focusing on a new geographical area, I was able to use it to then actually assist me to do some research into that particular, geographical domain, and how my business ideas would show up in that space. And honestly, that's just research that I could not have possibly done in that level of depth, even if I'd had a research assistant on it full time for a couple of months. So this is a really important way of how do we use it? How do we interact with it? Brainstorming ideas, obviously, throwing any thoughts that you have, putting them into projects, so that when you're working on something that's new, you've got that project and you have multiple threads within the project, so that you can keep information stored in a way that makes some sense for you, making sure that when you do create a new idea or resource, that you actually take the copy of that document at that point in time from within the AI system and create a physical document from it. And then looking at, categorizing things. There's easier ways to be able to get the information generated, but then it's also, well, how do you structure and store that information so it's available for you to use at some point in the future? And so it's kind of like doing that as you go is still just as important as if you were instructing a personal assistant to do that with you. So working through those things. Mapping workflows is important. Identifying efficiency gains, which is something that if you've got it in your business, you can give it data and actually ask it to analyze, how this quarter compared to the previous quarter and what are the things you might want to do to improve the outcomes for the next quarter. It's actually very good at data analysis. And then reducing the daily decision load that drains your energy. So some of the things that would normally kind of delay or you avoid because you're not sure where to go to find the answers, you can use AI to really assist you in that. One of the biggest things that I used it for that was really very helpful was I wanted to put in a funding application around this particular area of interest that I had. And I only had a short period of time to do it. And I really just didn't even know where to go to look for a funding availability source. And because I was able to use AI to explain what it was that I was trying to do and where to find things, I actually found an available funding application, space, and I was able to use AI to assist me to generate the answers to all of the questions that they were asking within that quite quickly because all of the knowledge was already within the systems. I'd already uploaded a lot of it and I was able to answer the questions as I was going. And it was almost like this interview style where I'm interacting with the system to help me actually make my application look more polished and more effective. And I was able to then, put in what I consider to be, my best application into that possible process. Something that I would say I would have avoided, I probably wouldn't have even put in the application if I'd had to stop and unpack all of those different elements for myself without the support of AI to be able to really easily bring all of this information together in a way that was consumable for the people on the other end. And if I was, if there was a question that I couldn't answer, I was able to go through and interact with AI on a very sort of easy basis to get to what was the best answer to this particular question. So, there are some great opportunities out there. So, I want you to think about rewiring for resilience. This is this idea about how do we adapt in our business to accommodate ourselves as we age as leaders, as our hormonal levels change, and as we kind of find ourselves, what seems to be a bit of a winding down. Now, not today. If you want to understand when I talk about what's going on in menopause, there's a recent promotion that I did on World Menopause Day that you'll find on YouTube at the Pink Shrink, talking about what are some of the challenges with regards to menopause. And if that's something that's affecting you, I would encourage you to go and actually have a look at that presentation that was done last month for World Menopause Day. So, yeah, but this is really about if you're feeling that way and some of those things are affecting you, what do you do about that? And I talk about this as the 5 Ps to rewire your resilience. So taking time to pause. And this is something that as really busy business women, we tend not to do. We allow our staff to pause, we pause with our family, but we don't tend to pause off our business interests and our drivers. So it's important that we take some time to interrupt that autopilot of overwhelm and urgency. A lot of times in business, we find that people are driving themselves for all of these sort of urgent things, but they're often not that important. And I will speak at different points about quadranting your urgent and important elements to make sure that when you're focusing your time and energy, you're actually focusing your time and energy that are on the things that are both urgent and important. And then you might look at the things that are truly urgent, then the things that are important. But also, you'll find there are lots of things on your list that are neither urgent nor important, and yet they still stay there. And it just seems to overwhelm the list. So you can even use AI to help you assist all of like analyzing what's actually in your task list on a daily basis and what's really important and what you need to focus on. Prioritizing. So that leads into this next point. Align the task with your true values and your current season of life. And that's not just life in business, it's also life outside of business. We have to try and juggle these things. Now, the challenge is, as women, we have been educated and raised to believe that we can have it all. You can have the family, you can have, the partnership, you can have this community, you can have all of it. You can have the business, and yes, you can, but not without some compromise on something, usually our health. So we drive ourselves and we push ourselves to the point of exhaustion. And so what we want to try and do is think about what's the tasks and the values that we have for this point in our life. What do we really need right now? And at the other end of it, what are the key outcomes that will really make us feel like what we're doing is purposeful and has true value in the world, and makes us feel like what we've done is, shown up and given back and done the things that make us feel like that's what we're here for, right? Partnering. So let AI handle part of that cognitive and admin load for you. Make sure that you use it in a way that feels like it's effective and you're able to delegate certain things, the things that are important, you need to keep an oversight on. So allow it to do the heavy lifting for you, though, and then give you just that review point. Make sure, if you're worried about it generating things like emails or output for, clients or reports, just get it to generate these things and then use yourself as the editor or the reviewer before you kind of send that out. And then what you'll start to realize over time is that if you've trained it properly, you'll get more consistent output and you won't be making as many changes on the output that you get. So allow it to actually work with you to pick up some of that heavy lifting, and you just sort of maintain that leadership oversight of the output. And I'm going to say, even in things like, I took on a new staff member recently, and I basically went into ChatGPT and I said, this person's coming on to help me do this kind of work in this kind of role. Let me create a welcome document that gives them an overview of what I'm expecting from them in the role. Next thing, I've got a 3-page outline that I was able to give to that new staff member on day one and go, welcome, this is really what your role is and what I'm expecting from you. And yes, I could tell them that information, and I did, but it meant that they had something to take away and they didn't have to necessarily make notes from it. So it was a really useful shortcut for me in terms of my onboarding process. Then protect. Honor your energy. I cannot stress that enough. Honor your energy. Make sure that you remember self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. Your nervous system needs to have some calm time. Your nervous system needs an opportunity to reset. And one of the challenges is, if you find that your sleep starts to be affected by your hormonal changes, which often it starts to happen to you after 40, that I want you to recognize that that's an opportunity to go to the doctor and insist on having a full blood analysis of where your hormones are at. Don't just let somebody tell you that it's, stress or depression. That actually, I really believe that all of our mental health comes from our endocrinology system. And we do not understand it enough. And I'm going to say, even the medical profession don't spend enough time focused on it. They're very literate now with regards to mental health. They're not very literate around hormonal health. And so it's something that I think is really important to educate women about, the importance of understanding that everything about your mental health is driven by your hormones. And if over 40 you start to feel differently, I really want you to understand we want to push. You'll have to push back to the medical profession about getting full and detailed blood analysis so that you understand what's really going on in your body and that you have the opportunity to make some clear decisions about what's right for you. Because a lot of them will push their own agenda. And this is something that, especially with regards to menopause, they're not well educated about, right? And they'll admit it. There's some really interesting podcasts and things around hormone stuff at the moment that it's amazing how hoodwinked even our medical system has been. So it's really important to do that and recognize those hormonal realities. And then the last one in this is about how you show up with people, your staff, your teams that you're managing, whatever, your family, your friends. Use your emotional intelligence to communicate and set expectations around what you're expecting from your people, what you're expecting from your partner, what you're expecting from your children, what you're expecting from your parents. It's okay to actually let people know that you also need support and that what you're trying to do is, show up and run this business and do great things that impact the world. Because I know that you are all incredible women who are here changing the world. And we want to be able to support each other to make sure that your message gets out in whatever that particular area of interest is for you. All right. What are the tools that lighten the load? And excuse me, 2 seconds, bit of water. Think about tools that are the EI or EQ tools here, and then the AI tools that complement them. So a brief reset. So looking at grounding yourself between meetings and and your tasks. So taking an opportunity to just do some short, even very short breath work will actually help to reduce the load on your vagus nerve. So one of the most simple things you can do is there's a technique where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 2 seconds, and you breathe out for 6 seconds. And within 2 minutes, that will bring arousal right down. The other one that you can do is alternate nostril breathing. So where you block one nostril and you breathe in and imagine the air coming up to your third eye point here. And then you block the other side and breathe out that one, breathe back in that one that you've just breathed out, block that nostril again and breathe out the other side. In doing that, you actually help to rebalance the brain. If you're very focused on a very detail-oriented task, it allows you to kind of open your brain back up and get in touch with your creative side. So alternate nostril breathing is one of those things yogis have practiced for thousands of years, and it's a very effective way to kind of calm the nervous system and rebalance your brain. Naming emotions to increase self-awareness and reduce their power. So this is a really important part of recognizing when you might feel frustrated or upset about something, anything. Just taking a moment rather than externalizing it onto whoever it is that you feel is in front of you that might be responsible. Maybe they are. But taking a moment to kind of just wait and go, what is this emotion I'm feeling and where has it come from? Before you actually take the next step of expressing what that emotion is and how you're feeling and, projecting it onto whoever you might feel is responsible. But it's a really important opportunity to just take that kind of breath. Setting micro boundaries to protect your energy and focus throughout your day. So this is like just the little things. I often say to people, we don't manage time well. And if you have a like if you've got staff and you've got an open door policy on your office, one of the challenges in that is that while you're trying to focus on certain things, you get lots of these interruptions from your staff. I want you to make sure that you actually do implement a closed door policy for a bit. If you need to focus on really detailed things, one, you should be doing them in the morning. And two, I want you to have a closed door policy where you let people know, because we have these blocks of 60 to 90 minutes maximum where we get the most efficient focus opportunity, that you're going to close your office door. You're not answering the phone. Put your mobile phone in your bag and do not look at it. You are going to get into that focus mode while you get this particular large piece of work that requires all of your attention out the way, and the staff know that they are not to interrupt you during that time. If they need to talk to you about something, they can make a note and they can speak to you afterwards. Nothing is that urgent or important usually, unless, you've got somebody who's had an accident or whatever, but there's usually nothing that can't wait for that little bit. So have a bit of a closed door policy for a period of time to allow you to get you working in a way that makes it a little bit easier for your brain to function. And then think about those clearer kind of communication techniques that reduce misunderstanding. And, I think as women, we're naturally good problem solvers. When we interact with others, we do understand that we're trying to always put ourselves in the other person's perspective. We do have great empathy, and we do understand that, people come to these things with different experiences. I want you to also stop and think, though, that sometimes that empathy for everybody else really, it gives you a good way of communicating, but we need to also not take it too far and completely lose ourselves in the self-sacrificing to everybody else. So being clear in that communication and making sure that there's reduced misunderstanding. And always, I say to people, have the conversations that are difficult by keeping the difficult stuff in the middle. The shit sandwich, right? The positive information followed by whatever negative information you might have to give, and then end it with another positive at the end, so that you've got the book ending of that negative piece of feedback surrounded by two positives. That gives this sort of sense of open communication and helps people hear the problem without taking it personally. And they also feel more positive because you've already given them some awareness of something that you're really happy about, and then they're really able to take on that, legitimate feedback. All right, AI tools. I've used ChatGPT as the example here, but there's Claude, there's Copilot, there's you name it. Whatever your poison, pick your poison. I always say to people, you can try a few different ones to begin with, but too much information, it becomes overwhelming. So you want to try and pick something that feels like it works for you mostly. A lot of people who were playing around with this at the beginning were, oh, well, I use this one for this and that one for that. But honestly, it can be too much and it gets very confusing. It's sort of like better to, pick your brand. I'm an Apple girl. I'm always going to go Apple stuff. ChatGPT works for me. I'm going to use it for the majority of things, unless I'm given a use case that shows that I should use something else. So thinking, drafting, refining our written communication, really important. And just remember that you can tell it. So there are standard ways that it will reduce things. You can tell it. Use UK English. Don't use long dashes. Don't use double quotation marks. Don't use these too many emojis and these sorts of things. You want it to look like your kind of output. And because that's the problem. A lot of this automated output, everybody's stuff is starting to look the same. And over time, what happens is we get more and more generic information, I want to say. So don't forget to infuse your AI with your thought leadership around some of the areas that you're really passionate about. And don't be afraid to correct it. Go back and tell it that you don't like something and you want it to add to its memory the information that you're giving it, that's in terms of the feedback. So meeting transcription, as we discussed earlier, so tools to capture those key points without note taking. Note and workflow tools that can integrate with AI to organize your thinking. Some of these things automatically kind of cross over. Some of the things, I think we end up with too many things. I was on a call earlier today, and it's kind of like had two different note takers entering the room before I even had a person. So making sure that we've got those things set up properly and in a way that works effectively for us. The point is here to make sure that you take the time to set it up to work for you. It shouldn't feel overwhelming once it's in place and set up correctly. But much the same as onboarding any new staff member. You just need to onboard your AI to work for you in the best way possible. Thinking about the simple automations that handle routine tasks and reduce your decision fatigue. And as women in this modern day, we do have decision fatigue. It's very difficult sometimes for us to actually work out what to do next because there's a whole bunch of decisions that have to be made, but also there's much more variety available to us in the modern world. I want you to think about 40 plus women are the future of work. We are natural mentors. We are culture carriers and stabilizers. We've actually been there and done that. And we have a lot of this wisdom and insight to bring to the workplace, right? Other young people might come in and they might think they have all of the answers. They've probably got a lot of knowledge about different things, but don't discount the wisdom of your experience and that just sense of being around and seeing a lot of these things that have happened in years gone by and helping other people to understand that sometimes the very first thing that they come to and they think that's the answer, they probably need to just stop and think of some of those other elements that come into decision making. We're very good at that because we've had lots of years of experience. Organizations need your steadiness in an AI accelerated world. We've got a lot of people who are worried about the future of work. What's going to happen to their job opportunities if all of the knowledge stuff is handed over to AI? But actually, we need some curation of the AI world. We need some, critical thinking around some of the things that it tells you to go down a particular path. And you kind of go, hang on a minute, you also need to consider all of these other elements. And so I've used it very well to do some incredible research. In fact, I'm going to tell you that in the last 4 or 5 months, I've probably written a PhD using AI. And the reason that that's happened is because I was able to synthesize information that I could not have possibly, it would have taken me, 2 or 3 years of detailed, in depth research to find some of these things and these crossovers. But without my wisdom and experience that's come from years of interacting with human beings and helping, I understand people really, really well. I'm able to correct AI when it makes assumptions about what people will do in certain situations. And I'm actually able to go back and say, no, well, hang on a minute. What about this? Or what about that? You didn't think about the implications. It will very quickly make assumptions and go to an end point, which isn't necessarily as uh, detailed in breadth of all of the considerations. So don't think it's going to take your human reasoning and the layering of your reasoning away from you. It cannot. This is why we need to work in partnership with your AI agents to actually assist you to do more with less actual output, but I want to say higher order thinking and processing. It's very good at really quick computational things, but it still does make mistakes. So checking in with, the information that it's actually giving you to make sure it's correct is probably one of those things that's important. You understand people, not just processes. AI is essentially a language learning model. It is able to compute lots of data and give it back to you very quickly in a synthesized way. But it's still trying to do that in a way that makes you feel good. It's all you'll notice it tells you when you tell it it's wrong, it comes back and says, "You're absolutely right, Kerry." It knows it's wrong. Sometimes it'll still make the same mistake. So it's been written in such a way to be very positive, and because of that, we can often believe that everything that it's kind of, created is accurate. You still need to check the facts. So I will use a deep research mode most of the time when I'm looking for information because I want to make sure that I can go back to the sources of where it's got its information so that I know that I can reliably trust the interpretation that it's giving me for some of these things, because that's the element that me as a human being can bring to it that it's not doing. So, success reimagined. I want you to think about if we let if we let AI carry more of the weight, we can lead smarter and live lighter. You can use your emotional intelligence as your guide about where you want to go in the business and all of the things that you're doing. We can redefine our success with spaciousness, not sacrifice. It's not about, being in the office until 9 o'clock every night because you've got to get all of these things done. We can actually learn to embrace the AI elements by using our own emotional intelligence to know that it's okay for us to finish earlier, actually, because we created all of this amazing stuff in, a quarter of the time that it would have taken us before. So that deserves some downtime. That deserves an opportunity to go to a yoga class or a dance class and enjoy yourself, or have a massage, or go and have a facial, or, spend some time with friends that you don't get to see because you're always so busy. Replace that constant sense of overwhelm with intentional choices. Choices about the things that give back to your energy levels, because these are really important. And I want you to move from doing everything to directing what matters. Making sure, go back to what I said about the quadranting, make sure that you're focusing on what is urgent and important, and you're delegating things, whether it's delegating to an AI, whether it's delegating to an assistant and asking your assistant to work with your AI, doesn't really matter. But you want to kind of really pull back from being in the weeds of the business. We talk about it a lot, working on the business, not in the business. Use AI to actually do that more effectively. So your future is actually human, despite the fact. Have you noticed the theme in my slides? I love my dog. I love dogs in general. I think dogs are a great way to convey emotion and do it in a way that people kind of enjoy, right? Your future's all so brilliant. And I actually say this in terms of burnout. The recovery from burnout, I want people to end up in a sense of, burnout brilliance, that we're able to bring back that spark of life that happens when we feel like life is raised to the ground, that we can kind of rise in that brilliance of the phoenix coming from the ashes. So I want you to think about, it's your wisdom first, your emotional intelligence or your emotional quotient. That's your wisdom. You're wise. You bring an amazing element to your workplace and the people who work with you. AI just accelerates what you can do to get that information actually out faster in more effective means that helps more people get information. So my challenge to you for next year is the call to lead differently. I want you to think about how you might use these different things that we've talked about to show up and lead your people into a new era in our business lives. It's not negative. It's just working out how to embrace it in a way that helps you to deliver on what you need to do with your business, your people, and do it in a way that serves you. Okay, not just you sacrificing yourself to it. The EQ and the AI, or EI and AI, that's the wise woman within you. Wisdom is your superpower. AI is just your amplifier. So we want to make sure that your superpower is available and seen by more and more people. And that's what AI will do to help you. Now, if you think you're at risk of burnout, I just want you to note this QR code. This will take you to my detailed burnout risk assessment. It also provides you with an ebook at the end of it, looking at recharge, recover, and rise. So this is about, if you are experiencing burnout, there's an ebook there that gives you a lot of information. So please make sure that you scan that QR code. One thing that's helpful, I know that we're out of time, but in the comments, if you want to actually, give me some feedback on one thing that was helpful that you learnt from this process, that would be really appreciated. I hope that it was useful for you. And if you're interested in the menopause elements in particular, I'm actually creating a 4-week menopause accelerator. So you can scan this QR code and it will take you to an expression of interest page, because I'm still in the process of setting all of this up. This is all very new. And this is really hand-holding and supporting you to understand how menopause might be affecting your life. And this was the bit that I developed because I was so frustrated with the lack of information out there that is consistent and scientifically based. And I wanted to create a bespoke program for women who could, get that advice in that it's a small group coaching program. It's not one-on-one, but it is me working with the small group directly. And so part of the deliverables from this program is actually where we go through a detailed blood analysis. And by week 3, you've got a very clear report about what your hormones are doing. And it takes that long because it takes that long for you to get an appointment with the doctor and get the blood work done. But then we analyze it for you and we give you a detailed report about what's actually going on. And with that, I also take you through a detailed mental health assessment. We have a look at everything that's happening in your life. And this program is designed very specifically that by the end of your 4 weeks, you're going to have a 12-week program. You'll understand what's going on for you and then what you need to do to recover. And what's the best approach moving forward for you? If you are experiencing challenges from menopause, this will actually give you a clear idea about how it's impacting your life and what it is that you want, a clear map of where you need to go to improve it and get your life back on track. So if that's of interest, scan that QR code. You can register your interest there. All right. If you're interested in my books, they're all my books. Go to the website and have a look. I've got a new book coming out next year, surprise, surprise, on burnout and menopause and the impact that menopause has on burnout, and the impact generally that actually hormones have on mental health, because I think this is an area that is just not spoken about at all. So if you're interested, you can find them there. And that's me. So if you want to get in touch, there's an email address there. You can actually send an email directly through. If there's anything I might be able to support or assist with, to all of you incredible women changing the world. I know I met lots of you at our awards earlier this year, and I'm sure I'll see more of you again next year. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you so much.